So we're going to queue up Raid Guild, who I think has one of the coolest names of any project out there. I personally, after the DAO happened in 2016, the DAO hack, I sort of just wrote off the concept. And I don't know about you guys, but I just kind of, it was under the radar. And then all of a sudden, like I completely missed it. But all of a sudden, cool shit's happening with DAOs. Metacartel is a good example. And I believe Raid Guild is leveraging Metacartel. And Spencer and Adam are here to tell us all about it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. I'll say right at the onset, anyone who looked at the calendar invite for this might have noticed that this talk was supposed to be given by Deacon Brown. He had an emergency, so Spencer and Spencer and I are filling in, which we were laughing because at a meeting just last week, we were talking different project, but we were talking about an ETHDenver talk. And I said, look, the problem is I don't have time to plan a talk. I'll give a talk if someone else does the slides. And so here we are. I'm essentially going to try to do Deacon's talk based on his slides, but little other communication. So here we are. Awesome. I thought I hadn't planned this ahead of time, Spencer, but I thought we could show the trailer video first, because I noticed that StreamYard had
let's do it.
A video share button. How do I do that? Do I just
awesome? Just let me know when you want me to roll it.
Yeah, let's roll it. It's just it's a quick, fun explainer we made for what is Raid Guild. The rest of it is just a showcase of some of the work that we've done. You're right to cut it off before the copyright infringement kicks in.
Great.
Yeah, I guess from there, we can go ahead and jump into the slides if you want to just share that one, so people don't need to keep looking at my lovely mug, our lovely mugs, other than exactly small in the corner like that. Yeah. So yeah, Slayer, exactly. This one's called that particular version was called the Demon Slayer edit. Yeah, so Raid Guild. Raid Guild is a decentralized horde of designers, developers, marketing professionals who all got together about a year ago and started doing what we do, but as a decentralized collective, essentially. I'll go into the story a bit more, but the reason we're here to talk about DAOs and the future of work is ultimately we're DAO owned, DAO operated. Everything that we happens through our DAO interface, and like you were saying on the way in here, yeah, the broader community has moved on a great deal from the DAO. Although I'll say, personally, I still have government meetings and stuff where people say, well, we all know what happened with the DAO, and then immediately dismiss everything that you have to say. I think partially we're here to, talk about some of that stuff and kind of where we've come since the DAO and where Raid Guild has come in the last year, which has been a crazy year globally, certainly. But it's only accelerated everything for us. We'll have a slide a little later when we talk about sort of our growth and stuff like that. But yeah, we're Raid Guild. So let's kick this off. Yeah, so I guess at the point, Deacon was right to put in what's a DAO and what's future of work. It's not safe to assume that everyone knows exactly what the deal is with DAOs, et cetera. Even speaking at ETHDenver. Yeah, so a DAO, not the DAO, but a DAO, it stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. What it really is, easier way, I've also heard it called like a digital augmented organization, which is sort of taking the same acronym and giving it other letters, but that almost says it better insofar as, what a DAO really is a group of people who are using Web3 software to eliminate coordination failure. And the reality of how you do that really effectively is by controlling the money effectively. And so in its simplest form, a DAO is a bank, a collective sort of shared bank for your organization. And you can't add members with voting power, and you can't move any of the money around without votes. So if I want to get paid through Raid Guild, I have to put up a proposal for my payment that month, and the other members have to vote it through. And it sounds like it's all about controlling the purse strings, but what it's really about is collective ownership. The fact that everyone controls that kind of stuff really creates a unique sense of collective ownership. And in the case of Raid Guild, that collective ownership is over what is in essence a creative design and development firm. We recently spun out a marketing arm, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. And I'll say on the Raid Guild front, personally, before finding myself in Raid Guild, I spent 15 years in various versions of either owning my own creative agency or working at others. And this is kind of the bridge to future of work, but it really is a remarkably different experience working inside of an agency where literally every person is an owner of the agency along with you. And I think we're up to 90 people now, but because we're a DAO, the price of doing business is everyone is an owner. And that really, really changes how it feels like late on a Friday when you've got a thing due on Monday and you're trying to grind out these last few hours and you're going like, no one's even going to know that I worked on this because I'm just behind this faceless agency, versus the sort of collective feeling. Yeah, and I think, let me double check this next slide. Okay, the next slide is more history. So this slide is, I guess, again, I'm guessing Deacon's literally, I think, in a hospital somewhere. So I have gotten no input from him. But yeah, we'll get into history some more. But really, like, the exciting thing here that we've realized and we've tested out for the last year is, as simple as you can make that DAO software, it's working now, and it's allowing you to have what is, in our case, a collectively owned guild of people who are really working every day to, we call it slay Web3 demons. But, if we're real about it, we're just doing client work like any dev shop, building people's apps. I saw you unmuted, Spencer. Thoughts?
I think an important distinction between Raid Guild and the Moloch DAO framework that Raid Guild uses, or something to highlight there is, and it's captured a little bit in the bottom quote on the slide, but having just a very, very simple framework for collective ownership and how to make decisions about those funds really frees up everybody who is a collective owner, every member in the DAO, every member of Raid Guild, to experiment and kind of iteration after iteration of thinking and talking and experimenting, align iteratively around what it is we're trying to do, and evolve the DAO without having to change its infrastructure, without having to change the baseline kind of thing that keeps everything glued together. And so we are a collection of individuals, but we are kind of glued together by our membership in this DAO, and that glue allows us to experiment and do all sorts of interesting things, some of which we'll probably talk about in the rest of our time.
And I'll say, back to my previous point, the powerful thing of the collective ownership is, you can bring all your employees together and say, well, how should we handle this, client issue that came up? They're unhappy about something, like, in a fair way. Well, the reality is the owners are the people whose real reputations end up at stake, while the employees are all sort of, maybe you have some that will stand up and have a conscience about how they are going to handle things. Mostly they just don't want to lose their jobs. And so as we've worked to evolve the DAO and make good decisions from a, what does this mean for the DAO standpoint, it's been really interesting to see how that conversation is different and how the DAO intermediary, the software that is the DAO, has really effectively facilitated those at scales that I've been in startups at 20 people and somewhere around 20, 30 people. Like, that stuff starts to break down and you start to not have the same dynamic of like, well, it's everyone's reputation is at stake, and we're up to 90 some members now and still having productive, discourse about how to evolve the DAO and how to grow, our own standing without too much struggle, I guess, or without, while still holding to what ultimately are sort of core values, I guess. Which is actually a pretty good segue to talking about the history of Raid Guild just a little bit. I came on a bit later, so I wasn't there for this part, but I've heard tell of it. Raid Guild spun out of Metacartel, and ultimately Metacartel is another DAO. It's a grant giving DAO that focuses on giving grants to community first, what they call community first projects. There's a document I can share somewhere that's it's called the Community First Manifesto. It's a one pager. It's pretty easy, but it really comes down to the idea that if we're working with open source software and we're working in the space that Web3 finds itself, we end up in a situation where community is kind of all that matters, because so much of the rest of everything else, especially in open source where there's no intellectual property to hold dear, community ends up being all that matters. And so community is first. And so before we even started Raid Guild, there was a group of people that said, hey, we all want to do this kind of design work together. Development work together. What would that look like? And really, it started from chats, and more people joined the chats, and then then it was a call, and more people joined the call, and then that snowballs eventually to a point of going, I think we've got something here. And then you plug in the DAO, and that's where it can, the DAO, the software part of the DAO, and that's where it can really take off. The story behind the name Raid Guild, ultimately, and it's just one of my favorite things in the world, is alongside with the community first development, we've seen the emergence of sort of meme driven development, which is to say, even a step back from the idea that community is the first thing that matters. The memes that pull that community together are sort of the only things that matter. Ultimately, how do you communicate as a group? And in a sense, when I say memes, I don't necessarily mean, Bernie Sanders with his mittens. I mean, memes, the idea of like ideas that behave like genes. But the founders ultimately, Deacon would be able to speak to this a little more directly if I were here, because he was one of the founders. But the way I've heard him tell it is ultimately they started getting the group together, and they had a running joke that all of this stuff, all of this coordination, it just comes down to game theory, which means it comes down to game dynamics, which means everything's just a giant role-playing game. So why not just commit to that meme and then not have to explain a bunch of things? And it worked. And so Raid Guild is kind of built on the idea that, anyone who's ever played World of Warcraft or Dungeons and Dragons knows that everyone you need a well-rounded raiding party, right? And the dynamics are very very similar. When a client comes in with a demon they need slain, you need a designer and a developer and an account manager and a project manager. You're putting together your raiding party, right? If it requires other things, you call in those other things. And that's one of the things that I found the most remarkable about Raid Guild is that I've seen fail at other agencies, which is, the awareness that you need to pull that group together doesn't always exist. And I've never had to have that fight inside of Raid Guild, because there's this meme filter at the door, which is the understanding of role-playing games. And to be completely honest, when you explain this to some people, they go, well, geez, that's stupid. And, you know, the reality is that's a good filter, because I don't think it's stupid. I think it's fun. And so the people that also think it's fun, like, I want to work with. And so that's part of the beauty ultimately of Raid Guild. And yeah, it's popped out of that, and sort of our pursuant aesthetic popped out of that idea of you know, role-playing memes and stuff like that. So, you know, if you stop into the Raid Guild Discord, you'll see we all have classes instead of departments. I'm a ranger. I'm a what am I in Raid Guild? I'm a rogue.
You're a
legal
rogue.
engineer. I'm also a scribe because I write things, and a bard because I do marketing. There's a bunch of other ones. And yeah, it was really that's you know, that's sort of the mythology behind the birth ultimately of Raid Guild. Anything to add?
No, I also joined after, so
Yeah.
the stories you've heard are the ones I've heard, so you've got it covered.
I'm checking the chat real quick. I'm watching Twitch to see if anybody's talking. There were some questions in there that I'll get to in a minute, so stick around if you asked a question. What do we got? Yeah, so that's the history of Raid Guild. And you know, I'll say one of the cool things that sort of gets us, I think, as a is it a segue? No, it isn't. Okay. So that's Raid Guild. I feel like maybe we failed to talk a little bit earlier about the idea of the future of work. I think we used to talk a lot more about the future of work, and then the pandemic hit, and I think it's a lot easier to explain how this meshes with the future of work to people now that so much work is remote. But we used to talk more broadly about the idea that the future of work is remote, and you can be wherever you want, and shared ownership, and all these, you know, sort of things. And now everyone kind of just has to live that life, right? So the fact that everybody's so remote, this just tacks into the idea of once there isn't the sort of arbitrary geography of everyone being in the same office, you can start to do interesting things like layer DAO software on and start to have something like Raid Guild. And that really was the sort of grand experiment of Raid Guild. And this is kind of where we are almost, I think, exactly a year from when we were spun up.
Yeah, I think it was.
Can you tell I'm literally reading
2020
this?
ETHDenver.
Oh, I already said balanced roster. Cool. Yeah, so we have around 100 members. We've had people. I'm a housekeeper. We have a couple other housekeepers. We spun up separate houses to essentially focus on somebody, you know, to wrangle the designers, somebody to wrangle the developers. And then I oversee the marketing department. That's sort of more my background, digital strategy and stuff. And oversee isn't even the right word. It's a collective. It's a flat organization. I just earn a couple extra shares a month to sort of wrangle some meetings and keep the marketing effort going. We've had 50 weekly meetings almost every week. We've had a packed house for our weekly sort of meetings. We've switched to a pattern now where we stagger between meetings to handle ongoing guild and raid business. We call the client work raids. I mentioned that already, right? That's where Raid Guild comes from. And now we've started flip-flopping futures meetings where every other week we talk about the future of the guild and try to figure out growing and things like that, which has gotten us to the phenomenon of fractalizing, which is partially where the houses come from. But having hit about 100 members, we're sort of starting to have a use for sub DAOs is an easy way to refer to them, but they're almost more just spin-off DAOs. Where, you know, we have groups of people working together who, you know, the way to manage the money that flows into that department that makes sense is a DAO. And that's really interesting because it's kind of like having a departmental budget, but it's kind of like having a departmental budget where if enough people join that department, you could just kind of be like, cool, we're going to go over here now and be our own DAO. It really doesn't take anything other than sort of telling Raid Guild, you're going to go over here and be your own DAO. We do pay, I'll say, Shill Shop, which is the marketing DAO, does pay tribute into Raid Guild, largely because they feed us our business. So what are you going to do? And yeah, if you're here and interested, come by and check out the Discord. It's open. We have a few different open channels, so you can talk to us, and you may be rewarded 1,000-fold. I'm not sure what that means, but Deacon will be in the Discord.
It's Deacon being Deacon.
Deacon being Deacon. You can ask him. One of the other things that has started to happen as we've been working on projects is ultimately we have revenue, we have money flowing into the bank, and we want to use it for things. And so we've started internal projects. Ultimately, one of them being DAO House, a sort of a full-scale almost startup that spun out of, it's almost every member is a Raid Guild member, and Spencer and I are both on that team. We went to go work on that. I think there's a DAO House talk sometime later. And we built our own info page. I'll show that off if we have time, but we might run out of time because I talk a lot. We've been working on an escrow app, which is really cool. We needed it. It's a classic case of dog fooding. I think maybe Spencer can talk about it a little more. He worked on that one. But yeah, it's just to handle client funds in a responsible way, but we're working on spinning that out so other people can use it. Certainly creative professionals are in need of escrow tools.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff. So I saw one of the questions in the chat is, do you get paid in crypto or in fiat? We only ETH and ERC20s is what we take, because that's what goes into our DAO, and that is what we have collective ownership over. And so there's a lot of infrastructure that we have realized, and infrastructure and tools that we've realized that we need for ourselves to make things easier on both ourselves and on clients. And there's a lot of fun, interesting experiments that we've been doing with the news tools in Web3 to kind of replace or make a lot of things that used to be really hard and annoying a lot better. One of those is our escrow system. We're likely going to be building that out a little bit more and automating some of our processes even more with additional smart contracts and Web3 tools. So there's a lot of stuff that we work on in addition to working for clients. And one of the ways that, or actually the only way that we really are able to do that, is because the way this all works is that, and you might be able to see this at the bottom of the page here, is that when we get paid as raiders, when we do client work, we give 10% back into the DAO, into the collective ownership pot. And then that 10% can be spent on whatever the DAO as a group, as an organization decides it wants to spend the money on. And some of those things have been some of those tools that we were just talking about and were on the previous slide.
This is actually a good place to answer a question from Twitch from Crypto Unico, I believe it was, who asked about the tribute, why we have tribute in the DAO. I'll say, one, we're working on stabilizing that now because ETH is so wild. 1 ETH is way too expensive as tribute. But the real reality is the shares in our DAO have value. And so if we're going to give out 10 new shares to a new member, it would dilute everyone else in the pool if we didn't have it at a stabilized price. That's part of it. Part of it's also just buy-in. It's so easy to get into a DAO because you just a couple clicks and your proposal is submitted. That we early on, the group decided that they wanted to make sure that people were only joining if they were serious. And I put up the ETH. Everybody else that wanted to get in put up the ETH. It makes sense to me as an easy filter to sort of both reduce people that might see an attack vector by joining the DAO, but also just it's fair to have a bar set for how serious you are about the project. Sort of a put up or shut up kind of thing.
That said, we are also and have been for some time experimenting with other ways that people can join the guild, not just by sending 1 ETH into the bank. So we have an apprentice program that has been a really big success and is going to be probably morphing and getting more formal potentially in the near future. And so via that program, You can be an experienced developer or have experience in other areas in Web3, or you can be a little bit more of a beginner and kind of work your way up and work your way into the guild. So you don't have to just have, what is it now, $1,700 lying around to join an organization.
Right. Yeah. So you can start working without putting up that tribute, so you can earn the money for that tribute in the process of working through the apprenticeship. But yeah, I've had this up for a little bit. I want to save the time of not reading through the numbers here, but here's just some sort of by the numbers. I like the 9,000 years of combined experience.
I am not 100% sure that is accurate. I suspect that might be a deliberate exaggeration.
We've got 17. I mean, I've been at it for 15 years. 17 internal projects we did, 20 external projects, 11 client projects. Yeah, $200,000 paid out to people through this stuff. Pretty good for the first year of a startup to me. And then, yeah, we've had these spin-offs. We got this bad boy, Fire Eyes, which is all about tokenomics. The Shill Shop, which is doing marketing work for people. The DAO Shop, which is helping other people set up DAOs. And then we're working on the Angry Dwarf Guild and the Tavern Keeper Guild. The Angry Dwarf Guild is to help people with their treasuries, and the Tavern Keepers is to help with community organization and stuff like that. Really, these are all just places where we realized as projects came through that people needed other services that we have people internally that are good at. And Guild, it's all entirely self-directed. I stood up and said, "Hey, I can put together a shop to handle that stuff." And so now I'm the keeper of Shill Shop, and we're doing marketing stuff for clients that have come through. The alpha. Yeah, so I guess this is just sort of the pitch ultimately, sort of the future of this stuff. We have the experience, we have the talent. This is working. It really is an opportunity. I think we have here to do something that is new and exciting. The question ultimately though is like, what do we want to accomplish? And I suspect where Deacon was going with it, that is, I have no more power to make that decision than he does, than Spencer does. It really is up to the DAO. So if anybody listening to this thinks that's cool and wants to, come weigh in, the tent is open ultimately. Can learn all about that stuff at raidguild.org.
I will add that this is an exciting time for Raid Guild. We are, I think, there was a question in the chat about how we're handling gas costs. We are in the process of migrating our DAO over to XDAI, and that is going to allow us to experiment with a lot of new interesting stuff. So things like different rewards models, or the way that we organize ourselves, and the way that we maybe can automate some more stuff. So there's a lot of really exciting things that come out of that.
Yeah, just some of the thanks to call out. DAO House, where we now administer our DAO, which I'll pull up real quick so you can take a look at it. It looks kind of funky because my massive screen is shared, but this is what it actually looks like inside of our DAO, where we have our wallet with all our stuff in there, and our members, settings, proposals. So, if you want to get paid, put a proposal in here. That's how all that stuff works. And then ultimately, if you want to check out the page, raidguild.org is the place to go. I saw somebody in the chat said they applied a little while ago and haven't heard back. Yeah, that relates to what we were just working on with Spencer. We are
awesome.
Figuring out some admin junk so we can process this stuff more effectively.
Well, guys, thanks for the info. And I got to say, you're after my heart, by the way, combining chiptunes with Slayer. Did you happen to know what chiptune artist that was for the intro?
No, I don't.
You don't hear a lot of chiptune these days, but when you do, it's like, oh, yes, that's good stuff.
Yeah, I can look it up. It's something we licensed off of like a stock audio
Cool.
website.
Well, guys, great aesthetic, great, and I love the fact that like you said, you're ceding control to the community. This is the true spirit of permissionless and decentralization and a DAO. So keep rocking out.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.